Josh, great to have you here with us. And we got to discuss, what do you see as the biggest points to look ahead for with big tech companies?
Absolutely. So just for starters, we've talked a lot about regulation and possibly breaking up big tech, but you got to remember that Joe Biden was not one of the candidates from the Democratic primaries who was all in on regulation and breaking up big tech. So I would be surprised to see the political willpower necessary for those companies like Facebook to get broken down into Instagram, WhatsApp, and their smaller companies. But the bigger thing that will be a huge boon to the tech industry in 2021 is Joe Biden is likely to restore a lot of the protections for the H-1B visa program, which tech giants rely on for hiring highly skilled workers from abroad. And the Trump administration gutted that program and has made it much more difficult for these tech giants to hire the kind of engineering talent they need to keep their companies afloat.
As we heard a few minutes ago, Biden is being pushed to break up big tech. What might that look like, and how would it change the services that many of us use, some of us love even?
The idea is that if these companies were broken up into smaller units, they would have to compete for users' attention and business, and therefore would be incentivized to treat these users much better. So you could imagine that with Facebook, if it had to compete against Instagram rather than owning it, they both might compete over privacy policy. But that would take a huge amount of political willpower, and you're more likely to see regulations that restrict the kind of acquisitions that these giant companies can make in the future.
Now, some Google or Alphabet employees, they are unionizing, and today we learned that you've got some 6,000 Amazon workers in Alabama that are looking to do something of the same. They're going to be voting to unionize. What does this say about the current corporate culture of these big tech companies?
Workers want a more responsible workplace. It's one of the biggest drivers of recruiting, is having a mission statement that people are proud to talk about. They want to be able to go to cocktail parties, or I guess in this case, Zoom happy hours, and talk about their company with pride. And you're seeing this across the industry because, as we've noted over time, backlash from users, advertiser boycotts, and even the threat of government regulation has not caused significant change in policy at these tech giants. But when their employees threaten to walk out, to quit, the massive competition for talent in Silicon Valley and in the tech giants all over the world forces those companies to listen to their employees when they might not listen to the public.
And if we can talk about the timing that this is happening, we are in the middle of a pandemic where we do know that on the economic front, there have been so many millions of jobs lost that are still waiting to come back into the economic situation, the employment situation as well. How much power do employees have right now to hold their corporations accountable, even if it is in the middle of the pandemic?
It can be very disparate. At the top end of these big tech companies where employees might command multi-$100,000 salaries for being artificial intelligence experts, for instance, they have a lot of power because there's a constrained supply of those employees. But at smaller corporations and the mid-tier market, employees don't have nearly as much power. So they need to be careful with what they do so that they can keep their employment at this trying time. But what we're seeing is that the speed to hire has gone down significantly amongst COVID. And so there are companies who are still rapidly hiring despite the market disruption, and companies that really focus on that kind of mission-driven ethos and real perks that help people in their daily life, especially while working from home, are attracting great talent and are able to even fill spaces left by people who leave.
And Josh, we can't talk about tech without talking about creators as well. Getting into Signal Fire saying that 50 million people, more than 50 million people around the world consider themselves creators. So how do you define creator in this era? And do people look to break into this space? For those, what do they need to know?
Yeah, one of the most popular jobs that kids cite that they want to be when they grow up is no longer an astronaut or a fireman. It's they want to be a YouTube creator. And you can think of creators being different than traditional celebrities because those celebrities create their fan base out of traditional media, which is broadcast. It's one way to the users. And that means that they don't really have that same connection with their audience. Whereas creators typically come up through social media and user-generated content, and they're making niche content specifically for their audience, and they're growing purposefully online. And what you're seeing is that after the first phase where creators join these massive social platforms like Instagram and YouTube, and then the second phase where influencer marketing emerged, emerged and brands started to pay them for their presence, now the big next phase is a huge wave of startups that are helping creators bring their audiences off these big social platforms to their own websites and properties where they can monetize them much better and earn a real living off of their passion. And that's what we're investing in here at Signal Fire.
Josh, I'm going to get a strike against me, so I got to go quickly. 15 seconds here. OnlyFans changing their payment system. We saw this a few years ago with YouTube demonetizing. What does the future look like for these creators?
We're going to see a lot of the creators who might try to work in the adult industry getting moved off of these big platforms that are trying to remain brand safe, and instead moving to platforms like OnlyFans that are dedicated to that kind of content where they can openly sell. And really, it's about creators becoming founders. They need to hire all the people, the e-commerce experts, the analytics experts, to be able to build a robust multi-SKU business where they're not just selling their fame, they're actually selling commerce and merchandise to their fans.
All right, Signal Fire principal investor and head of content, Josh Constine, joining us here today.